Brazil had the shirt. Brazil had the forwards. Brazil had the players Europe had already chosen. And still, against Norway, as the World Cup began slipping away, the strange thing was not just the score. Brazil were hard to recognize. The ball still reached the wide players. The dribbles still came in flashes. A midfielder still turned away from pressure with that familiar balance. For half a second, the old expectation would rise. Then the move would lose its shape. The pieces were recognizable on their own, but they did not always arrive in the same rhythm. The team did not carry one clear football language. It looked like Brazil in pieces. That may be the real wound of 2026. Brazil lost 2-1 in East Rutherford in the last 16 of the World Cup. Erling Haaland scored twice late, first with a header from Andreas Schelderup's cross, then with a low finish in the 90th minute. Neymar scored from the penalty spot deep into stoppage time, but by then the match had already changed shape. Brazil had chances before that. Bruno Guimaraes missed an early penalty. Vinicius Jr. forced Orjan Nyland into a low save. Endrick found himself one-on-one and could not finish. There were enough moments to imagine a different result, but not enough to make Brazil feel whole. When the whistle came, the players did what Brazilian players have done too often in the last 2 decades. They walked slowly. Some looked at the grass. Some looked toward the supporters. The shirt still carried 5 stars. The expectation still felt enormous. The talent was still obvious. Then the old question returned, with more weight than before. Why did Brazil no longer look immediately like Brazil? This was not the silence of 2014. It was not a national trauma built around one impossible scoreline. It was quieter than that and harder to solve. Brazil had not been destroyed. Brazil had been edged out by a team with a clearer route through the match and a striker who punished the moments that mattered. That is why the usual explanation feels both true and too easy. People say Brazil lost its identity. They say modern football made everyone similar, that pressing, spacing, data, and European club systems have flattened the old differences. Others say Brazil stopped producing the kind of player it once produced, that the street disappeared, that the academy turned invention into discipline too early. There is a real feeling behind those sentences. Brazil was never expected to be only another strong national team. Even when it was pragmatic, even when it defended deep, even when it won through structure more than fantasy, people expected to recognize something before anyone had to explain it. A Brazilian team was supposed to announce itself through the ball. After 2026, though, identity is too small a word for the problem. Brazil did not stop producing Brazilian players. It did not stop producing dribblers, quick forwards, midfielders who can turn away from pressure, defenders who can step into space, goalkeepers formed for the modern game. The market has not stopped looking at Brazil. European clubs have not stopped arriving early. Something else has changed. The route has changed. Qatar now looks like the beginning of that cycle, not its center. In 2022, Brazil still carried figures from an older Seleção imagination. There were players who had lived for years inside the public argument. Celebrated, doubted, defended, blamed, watched through club seasons and national team disappointments. The team had European experience, but it still had an emotional spine people knew how to read. That tournament ended against Croatia. A late Brazilian goal, a late Croatian equalizer, penalties, and another exit. By 2026, the wound had widened into a pattern. New coaches came through. New attackers took on larger roles. New midfield bodies entered the team. The squad kept changing, but the difficulty remained, turning Brazilian talent into a visibly Brazilian team. Brazil still gives many players their first relationship with the ball. The futsal court, the academy pitch, the crowded small-sided game. The first habit of solving pressure with the body before the pass arrives. Those things have not simply vanished. That early Brazilian layer still matters, even if it is no longer always the layer that decides how the finished player will be read at the highest level. What often happens now is that the elite habits are completed somewhere else. The winger learns when to hold the touchline and when to attack the inside channel in Madrid, Manchester, London, Lisbon, Paris, or Girona. The midfielder learns pressing angles, coverage distances, transition control, and the timing of contact inside leagues that demand repetition. The forward learns that talent survives only when it can fit into pressing triggers, spacing rules, and the physical rhythm of the club. The player is Brazilian. The first touch may still carry Brazil. The professional language that makes him elite is often refined away from Brazil. Brazilian players have gone abroad for decades. That part is old. The difference now is timing, visibility, and memory. Earlier stars often became legible inside Brazilian football before the world fully claimed them. They carried domestic images into the Seleção. Supporters had seen them in Brazilian stadiums, in state championships, in Brasileirão afternoons, in Libertadores nights. They remembered the first explosion, the bad tackle, the argument with a defender, the goal that made a teenager feel inevitable. The national team gathered those memories and gave them a larger shirt. That route has weakened. Now, many players become global before they become deeply familiar at home. A teenager can be bought, loaned, protected, branded, trained, and interpreted through a club network before most Brazilian supporters have built a long adult memory of him. He still belongs emotionally to Brazil, but his football identity may become clearer first through another institution. This is where the distance begins. The modern Brazilian attack shows it most visibly, but it should not become a list of individual stories. It is a collective image: wide forwards, narrow forwards, young attackers moved early into European football, players learning to make their gifts useful inside clubs that attach a cost to every gesture. For a Brazilian supporter, admiration can feel slightly uneasy here. The player is known through Madrid, Manchester, or another European shirt before he is fully known through Brazil. At Real Madrid, Brazilian attackers learn the pressure of a shirt that turns every run into a global event. In England, the game asks for duels, sprints, pressing, second balls, and quick decisions. In Portugal, Spain, France, and club network football, a young Brazilian is not only watched as a talent, he is positioned, developed, valued, and moved. When those players return to the Seleção, they bring elite tools. That is not the problem. They are sharper in many ways. They understand space. They run more. They press more. They have lived Champions League tempo early. Then Brazil has to turn those tools into one image quickly. A national team does not have years of daily training. It receives players between club seasons, qualifiers, travel, injuries, pressure, and tactical changes. It cannot build every habit from the ground up. It has to connect what the clubs have already made. That is why Brazil can have dangerous attackers and still look uneven as an attacking team. One player is used to receiving wide and attacking isolation. Another is used to rotations around him. Another attacks early space because his club creates transition after transition. Another has learned to wait, stretch the back line, and finish quickly. All of them may be Brazilian. The move may still begin in different languages. When midfield gives quieter proof. When people ask why Brazil no longer looks like Brazil, they usually look first for the dribbler. They ask where the looseness went, where the fantasy went, where the player who makes the game feel less planned has disappeared. But the body of the team has changed in midfield. Brazil now asks central players to cover wide spaces, resist pressure with their backs to goal, press without breaking the team, win duels, protect transitions, arrive near the box, and still pass cleanly. They must be athletic enough for the modern game and calm enough for the shirt. That produces a different kind of Brazilian midfielder, less easily described by flair, more visible through scanning, body position, timing, coverage, and the ability to survive in crowded zones. He may be essential to the team, but harder for the crowd to feel immediately, because so much of his value appears in prevention, balance, and timing, rather than in the visible gesture people remember. The qualities are real. They are also harder to claim as a national style because they belong to the shared grammar of elite football. A midfielder who wins the second ball, closes the lane, turns away from pressure, and moves the ball before contact may be doing excellent work. In the Seleção, that work does not always announce itself as Brazil, so the loss people feel is not simply the loss of dribbling, it is the loss of immediate recognizability. Brazil still produces the gesture, a feint near the touchline, a toe-poked pass between two defenders, a first touch that changes the angle of the attack, a defender stepping out calmly when the safe ball is backward. These things still appear in Brazilian bodies. The path that once made those gestures collectively readable has become weaker. The domestic club used to help introduce the Seleção to itself. A player did not become known only through transfer fees, scouting clips, or European nights. He became known through repetition. Supporters watched him fail, improve, carry responsibility too early, and leave after leaving some image behind. Now the leaving often happens before the image settles. That changes the emotional contract around the national team. A player can be admired abroad and still feel slightly distant when he returns in yellow. The supporter knows he is Brazilian. The supporter knows he is elite. But the deeper memory may belong to another stadium, another league, another camera angle, another commentary language. This does not make the player less Brazilian. That is the wrong conclusion. Brazilian football has never been pure. It has always absorbed, adapted, borrowed, resisted, and remade itself through contact. The great Brazilian teams were not sealed away from the world. They were shaped by travel, economics, coaching exchanges, tactical changes, and the demands of their own eras. Still, there is a difference between exchange and having the final form of the player recognized somewhere else first. When that happens, the Seleção faces a new task. It cannot simply recover a style waiting untouched in the past. It has to build a shared language from players whose elite formation has become international. That is why the Norway match mattered beyond the result. Brazil lost because Norway scored twice and Brazil scored once. The details are not mysterious. Chances were missed. Holland finished his. Nyland saved his team. Brazil went home. The discomfort around the defeat came from something larger than one bad night. Brazil chased the match with talent still visible, but without fully convincing people that the team knew what version of Brazil it was trying to become. There were attacks, there was urgency, there were moments when the ball reached dangerous areas and the old expectation rose for half a second. The overall image remained unsettled. Brazil had pieces of several elite club worlds inside one shirt. That may be more uncomfortable than simple decline. It would be easier if Brazil had stopped producing players. Easier if the old source had gone dry. Easier if the squad looked ordinary, and the answer could be found in one generation. But the players are there. The clubs know it. Scouts know it early. Europe knows it quickly. The harder question is what Brazil does after that. A national team cannot rely only on passports, nostalgia, or scattered brilliance. The distances have to feel shared. The pressing has to belong to the same idea as the attack. The midfield has to connect the ball-winning body to the creative body. The forwards and fullbacks have to recognize the same triggers before the crowd can recognize the same style. Brazil does not need to imitate 1970, 1982, 1994, or 2002. Those teams belong to their own conditions. Their football cannot be recovered by costume, by memory, or by asking modern players to pretend the game around them has not changed. The next Brazil has a harder task. It has to take players formed across different elite environments and make them look like they came from one football imagination. After the Norway match, the yellow shirts walked off under a familiar weight. Another World Cup gone, another cycle closed, another set of questions waiting at home. But the question should not stop at identity. It should not settle for saying Brazil lost itself, or that modern football made everyone the same. Those answers describe part of the feeling. They do not explain the root that produced it. Brazil is still producing Brazilian players. What changed is that the route from Brazilian promise to elite football now often passes through other systems before Brazil can fully recognize the player as its own. That is why Brazil still appears in flashes, in a touch, in a turn, in a dribble, in the way a player protects the ball when pressure comes from behind. It is still there. But it arrives back changed by other dressing rooms, other leagues, other tactical demands, other ideas of what a player must become to survive at the highest level. The next Seleção does not need to find an untouched past. It needs to make those translated players speak together.